Welcome to the Masterclass of the Legend of Nephi. This first lesson is titled, Lehi is a spiritual name of the father of Nephi. And as a mathematician, there's a lot of work to get to that answer. And what I will show is the answer, not the hours and hours of work that I use to get there. So great are the words of Isaiah. We have two people in the book we call the Book of the Mormons that said that, Nephi and Yeshua. And there's one scripture that has the word rivers, islands in it. Isaiah 42:15. And as I was reflecting on this specific scripture today, I'm reading this, I will make you a mound building people with your refuge, so your garbage becomes your mounds. I will dry up all your herbs, don't know exactly what that means, and I will make the river islands, and I will dry up the pools. So the King James Version is some guy reading probably the either the Masoretic text or the Septuagint and coming up with an interpretation. And if you understand the nature of the King James Bible, it was done quite quickly. So apparently these are the Hebrew words. So if you wanted to see a Hebrew word, you could do that. Obviously, this is the best tool on the internet at the moment. So you could look up each word. Doesn't surprise me that har means mountain, probably eventually became kar when they got to America and interfaced with the locals. But the word that we're looking for, rivers, nahar, there's lots of words for rivers in the King James Bible, which tells you there's a lot of Hebrew words. But they don't, for example, have some obvious words. What's the difference between sweet water versus sour water versus black water? But here is the answer. So how is this pronounced?
Strong's H 339 E.
E. Those of you that speak Guarani should know that has a meaning in and of itself. So it's supposed to mean isle, island, or country, or coast, island, shore, region. So it has something to do with land next to water. Or is it water next to land? This we don't know. And that it has such a interesting meaning, and this is one of the best ways to get it. It's one of the earliest sources of a concordance. So an earliest source of the concordance was likely a curator, and likely didn't have a lot of time on his hands like modern academics and erudites to spin around in circles. And so somewhere habitable that's land as opposed to water. So there's this concept that you can't have an E without the water. A maritime land, that makes sense. The seashore, an island. So there's a connection of land and water. So that's important to understand with that word. So, I lost my place. So for example, if I were to say Iguazu, I currently believe that says water, big, falls. Falls might be noise, but that's my interpretation of that meaning based on my study of the languages. The Guarani, Iguazu. Iguazu. So certainly there's land tied there because there's a river here. Water big falls. So let's get back to the $1 million thing. This is E. And it's actually got two vowels. The aleph, for whatever reason, is silent here. It's ai. And then you're going to notice there's some of these dots. They're called diacritics or cantillations. What they are, and there's a way to turn them on. You can turn them on and off up here. So those are the cantillations. So the Masoretes would sing this as a song. The vowel points would help clarify. So I would still say that's a vowel point. So that might be called a diacritic. So the schwa sound, the breast symbol, with the dot on the left is S, with the dot on the right is sh. That just tells you the Hebrew language was broken. And as a broken language, they tried to recover what they could. You don't have one character with multiple sounds and then add these cantillation marks to distinguish them. And if you look at the original language that we're aiming for as our target, it would have looked like this. So this is the symbol for aleph. Aleph, spelled out in the Hebrew, air quotes Hebrew. This was probably one of their original symbols, and it's probably tied to a hieroglyph of Egypt. So Nephi and Lehi was probably writing in something similar to this. And then we have, aleph, probably the first letter, bait, house, looks like a house, an enclosure. Then we have a g sound, which is different than the gaim sound, which might have been the guaim sound. So what sounds are missing from the language is a sign of how the language is broken. So the schwa symbol, looks like omega, is literally it's literally the breast. What sound does a mother make when she tries to calm her crying child? Shh. So this is the sh sound. This is the symbol. This might be the initial language. But they went into captivity, post-exilic captivity. They come back out. They've mixed this writing somehow with cuneiform, and they've lost some of their letters. But I would assume aleph, M, Maim, and Tav were the first, middle, and last letter of their alphabet. I would estimate they had probably 30 letters. I would estimate that they had vowels, because they have some, but they're not always used, and sometimes they're silent. That's just erudite speak for the language is broken, the Masoretes tried to repair it, and if you want to understand the legend of Nephi, you need to look through that problem and look closer to the sounds. So, for whatever reason, the M, Maim, is supposedly the N, same symbol in Egyptian, but it's the letter N. Again, makes me wonder what they think they know about Egyptian. So if you're missing sounds, if you drop sounds, so the example of dropping a sound, we say Sodom and Gomorrah. So the Gaim was a variation of that and got reduced to Aim. The Gas went away. And I believe right now that it might have been a Gua sound, a GW sound, like agua. And those that tried to unlock the Egyptian early on, Young and Champollion, used two different techniques, but they were trying to anchor to languages that have been influenced a lot. So Champollion, the Frenchman, had the best solution, which is go to the Coptic, the Demotic, see how people living said words, and see if you could map it back to the Egyptian. Good idea, but the better solution would have been to map it back to the Amharic, which was an Ethiopian language, which was more isolated, so had less chance of evolution. So Sodom and Gomorrah could be Sodom. I don't know how to say Sodom correctly in Hebrew. It could have been Guamorah. So the question is why do you need to have 3 or 4 T sounds? You have titz, you have tav. This is the symbol of Nephi. The letter is 0 in Egyptian. And obviously tav. So you have like 3 or 4 T sounds. You have this H sound, but then this HK sound, which is the dot sound, which is also found kind of as this rope symbol in Egyptian. And so is that K or is that Ch? Because this is obviously K. And so, then if you look at other languages, the best language for me that kind of tries to map one sound to one letter is the Russian language. Хорошо, one symbol. Che, one symbol. So even though we say it's ch, we somehow say it's ch. No, it's one sound. Chi, as in chi squared, the kop sound. So Laman, Laman, teach. There's a play on words there in the legend of Nephi. So now, let's get to where we're going. So I care about the word rivers, islands. So in this case, river is Nahar, or something close.
Strong's H, 5104. Nahar.
So I rolled my R, but similar. So we got Nahar, and then we got this extra stuff. And this extra stuff is probably Im, which means plural, Nahar. So then I got E, which is supposed to mean islands or something to do with water. But I got this Lamad in front of it. And I got this Im. So why is this Im different than this Im? Is this that a T? So I get confused because you're looking at so many symbols across so many languages. So if I want to know what the actual word was, not what people thought it was in this Masoretic Hebrew, you need to use some different tools. So let's go here and take Hebrew into English. So rivers, plural, seems to be correct. So I'm trying to understand what that thing is.
Naharot.
So it looks like it's a holt, Naharot. So if I were to get rid of this part, what is that?
Vid.
And then you can see the context of how it's used. So it's like river reports. I don't know what that would mean. And I'm not going to get too far down that road. So some of you are going to say, well, shouldn't you take Hebrew and learn how the Masoretes tried to recover their language, and then how centuries of philosophies of men tried to build upon it and tried to understand the Hebrew language? Okay. If that's what you think is a wise strategy, knock yourself out. I will not do that. But this one's interesting. So we know there's a plural here. This plural I recognized. This plural I didn't recognize. So now I'm going to copy this. Oops, what just happened? Oh yes, interruptitis. No, I don't want your tool. I would have sought out your tool if I wanted. So this is interesting that there's some threaten is tied to this. So islands doesn't surprise me, Aleutian Islands, something about intimidation, which is really strange. But let me get rid of the plural, which I think is im, and that should update and be island. So the lamad is apparently saying a preposition to the island. And I'm curious if I did that, what that would be. Nothing. So my experiment failed. But we are arriving at the proof. So let's let this update. So if you look at the jobs of the people in the legend of Nephi, it starts with the father. Certainly I'm going to say it's called the legend of Nephi for a reason. But if the father didn't get off his... No, I'm trying to be polite in this video. If the father didn't respond to God and do his job, Nephi couldn't have done his job. So Mormon couldn't have done his job to fulfill the overarching goal of God, which is also tied to the word Mormon in the ancient language. Mormon, the son of Mormon, trained by a moron, didn't know where his name came from. He knew about the waters of Mormon. Maybe it's tied to an area of Naphtali called Meroni in the current King James, the Masoretic text, which was tied to a mythical place in Egyptian tradition, the Lake of the Gods, and each of the gods had an island. And the Lake of the Gods was called Mormon. And Jehovah had his island. So now, when I reflect on Mormonism, you have one prophet that says we need to push forward with Be Mormon, BeMormon.org. Tell your story. Mormon.org, focusing on this overarching theme of Mormon, restoring Mormon lore, that Mormon means literally God's good love, which can be anglicized or Romanicized or New Testamentized as Moroni 7. Moroni 7 was Mormon writing to his son saying, hey son, I found these other plates and I figured out what my name means. So then we have Gordon going down that path. Something's important about Mormon. And then we get a flip-flop. The current president of the church is sitting in the quorum when Mormon.org is going on, and he wants to undo Mormon. Now, he's getting a message from heaven. I have strong belief in the prayer circle. But maybe he's getting the other message. The other message is simple. So let's review some of these principles we're learning. 8 is greater than 3. Nephi is greater than Mormon. These are the people. How many witnesses were there for the legend of Nephi? The records of Nephi? The plates of Nephi? 8. How many witnesses for the Book of Mormon? Mormon built his opus, the Book of Mormon, and at the end he finds these plates and the first page is blackened with some word flower thing that was used like a first printing press. And he's like, oh snap, I better include these. These are pretty good. And so he writes this one-page transition thing, throws 2 plates into one record. Well, the Jaredites and the sealed record and all that. And then he sends a note to his son. Hey son, I figured out what my name means. Moroni 7. Oh, and then he decides to say, I am a descendant of Nephi. Words of Mormon. Versus what he said earlier in 3rd Nephi is, I'm a descendant of Lehi. These are all clues that are going to easily unlock some things. So, Nephi is greater than Mormon. And certainly Yeshua is greater than them all, but I think that's the second point. Mormon is greater than any other story, because Mormon means in Egyptian, God's good love. If only we would take the time to read from good books. The best books to start would be dictionaries. And so if you look at the whole story is about Mormon, God's good love. Nephi is the doer that builds a society that endures, so when Yeshua gets to America and he does the Lord's Prayer, he doesn't say, "Thy kingdom come." He's nodding his head to Nephi. Good job. Nephi says, "Great are the words of Isaiah." Yeshua has the local people sit down and review their scriptures, and he calls them out for Malachi, missing Malachi, but they wouldn't have had that data, Malachi, and he calls them out for how they treated Samuel the Lamanite. But then he also reaffirms, great are the words of Isaiah. Isaiah is the cartouche, is the Rosetta Stone that will link and help us unlock language. Is this D&C 123 important, or is this incidental? I can't spell. So you can decide that for yourself. Certainly, I lean to the D&C 123 camp. That's my life journey. You may be on another life journey. You may have a different view of things. So be it. As I introduce myself, I think there's 4 methods of introduction that are primal. Hello, my name is Monty from Montana. Here's kind of my life purpose, if you will. I have accepted the Lord and Savior, which I currently understand to have the name of Yeshua, into my heart and into my life as my personal Savior. Second component, my spiritual name is Nephi John, and that may update. And I'm on a path to fulfill my life purpose, which is to waste and wear out my life to bring truth out of the darkness. So that is the purpose of this masterclass. So if I were to meet you, I'd want to know what your name is. You know, you could have some sort of call sign about what you think your kind of skill set is, which is this, what your spiritual name is, what you see as your spiritual journey or current understanding of your spiritual journey. And then with those 4 elements, the 5th element is, how could we help and synergize our energies? Now certainly that's not an easy process of arriving at such thinking. So what is my name, my call sign? What is my relationship to Yeshua? What is my spiritual name? My spiritual call? What is my current tasks in that regard? And then the 5th thing would be, is there some sort of synergy between parties? So I have my skills. I'm very good at innovating, reconsidering whole systems. I'm not a detailed organizer. I'm not certain things. I have gifts, and I build upon those gifts. Others of you may have different gifts, and together we would come together and be edified as we move forward. So if this is something important in your life, that calling, maybe there's some synergies here, because I'm going to show you just today 1 dictionary. And I've been studying some of this for a long time, and as I study, things update. I don't know that I've arrived anywhere. So my fundamental argument is Laman was likely the name of the father of Nephi. So Laman, his firstborn son, was likely named after him. There's a teacher thing in his name if it was Laman. They were wealthy, they had access to money, they understood that what exquisite metal looked like. They seemed to have property rights to the first, the plates, if you understand the first meeting. The casting of lots I don't fully understand, but if Laman, the son of Laman, appears to Laban and says, hey dude, can I have those plates? There would have had to have been some Jewish standard by which that request could have been made. So what under the Jewish law would have allowed that? And then it says Laban accused them of robbery, which was basically saying, I don't believe your rights to these plates. Get out. I'm going to kill you. And that was the first version of that story. So Lehi became his name. And this is another important variable here. Lehi is a name in New York about where Joseph Smith lived. It would have been a name he could have pronounced. But Jehovah probably actually spoke the name. So, we have a pronunciation guide of the Book of Mormon. The church flip-flops on how that goes about. The early church members were going to ask Joseph that all the time. All of his brethren would get around and probably have all these conversations. And if you look carefully at the history, it seems like he made some comment to Emma about a word that sounded like her name. And just imagine if Jehovah is voicing this. After saying it to Joseph like 20 times, he's going to give up and say, Lehi's close enough, move on. So there was some event that created all these prophets voicing their concerns. That event was probably 612 BC. The Chinese explained that the comet that we attribute to Halley passed in the stars. A sign from heaven made prophets think, why did we see that sign? 5 years later, Lehi is just leaving. His wife gives birth to his son, Jacob, at Shazer. That is a fractal to what Samuel the Lamanite said. There was a big sign in the stars. 5 years later, there was an important son born that was the Redeemer of the world. There were so many signs in the heavens. So we need to collect data on signs of the heavens in the Arabian Peninsula, put some timelines there. There's some clear analogies. So this is a masterclass of the legend of Nephi. We are swimming in deep waters. Some of you may follow, some of you may not. It's your choice. But my proof is this sound.
Lehi. Lehi.
Lehi. So people have tried to go down the jawbone approach, all sorts of approaches. It's in the Masoretic text. The problem is that's hard to search for. So if I were to go back here and search, I think there's a... Yeah, I gotta fix this screen. Actually, let me just search for that. So I need to do some data preps. So I didn't find it in any of the places, even though I literally found it. Right? I found it there. So it's not searching the Masoretic very well, which I thought would have been this guy. But I guess not. So I need to do some continual data cleanup to make this search and this whole process easier. So the title of this first lesson is Lehi is the spiritual name of the father of Nephi. God gave him one job, and that job was to go to the river islands. And I've found elsewhere, Liahona might be a wordplay on this same Lehi, and it means the way to the river islands. And I'll have to dig into how I found that again. You're not going to find this phrase just using the basic Strong's Concordance. You're going to have to get into a scripture of Isaiah, get into the text, and decompose it, and you're going to go, there it is. And so some of the names, when we get into the geography of the lands of America, you're going to be surprised, and you're going to conclude over and over and over again that great are the words of Isaiah. So to conclude today, this is an update. I've had a different perspective, but when I was preparing what I thought to talk about today, this is my update. So I think a lot about the very first sounds Nephi wrote. So he wrote symbols that got equated to sounds. That was the whole point of the writings. So I think this is where I am for I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents. Ani Nephi Alma Alai, do you see to the river islands we go? Ema Aya Mormon Iya. And I think when the man we call Mormon, the son of Mormon, that had a son named Moroni, saw this record, one of those words was most important to him. Why would Nephi say the word Mormon in his introduction? And then we see some of these other words. Alma. There might be Helaman in here. So Alma was actually two words. Al, I spring forth. Ma, something about giving praise and glory, like mahala in Hebrew. So Alai, to the river islands. Ema. Aim means mother. I had to, and I added this today, I had to put Haya in there. So we can't talk about the original Joseph Smith Book of Mormon without the words, and it came to pass. And it came to pass can have different meanings about reflection. So what this is saying is Ani is I, even I, Nephi, shortened form of Naphtali. Alma, I spring forth from the glory to the river islands, which is a token of the name of his father, the spiritual name of his father, a token to his mother, and then a token to his God. Aya, Mormon, Iya. Even the good God that comes from the mystical lake, the God Jehovah that lives in the north. So this is my current understanding of 1 Nephi chapter 1, verse 1 in the voiced language. And so I guess, I have so many tabs open, it's easier just to, I guess the 30-second clip would be and so you'll notice River Island doesn't work. So I believe it's a modifier. It's describing the type of islands, the river islands. When we get into geography, that will make a lot more sense. We're in the year 2024. February 15th. No, it's not quite the 15th. It's a few days later. Okay, so to conclude, I will make the rivers islands. E. With an L in front. E with an L in front means to the island. I made it singular to keep it simple.
Lehi. Lehi.
The calling of the father of Nephi. Get your family to the river islands. River islands of the world. What is the largest river island in the world? Apparently it's in India. River islands. River islands by country. Islands by river, 31 of them. River islands in the U.S., 14 chances that he went to the Manhattan Island or Long Island because it's a river island. River islands of the Amazon. River islands of the Columbia. The Niagara River has islands. River islands of the Paraná. The Rio de la Plata, which is the Paraná. Just this idea of confluences probably wouldn't be how they would describe islands, given their nature. Great are the words of Isaiah. Lehi had one job to do, to take his family to the river islands. He laid the foundation for his son to build a nation. So let me conclude today with an option for some of you to look at something I worked on in 2020. You can read this, 95%, maybe even greater, of the perspective is unchanged. The legend of Nephi, written in simple English. The introduction kind of shows my worldview at that time. Not a big change, but there is some change. And then I wrote the legend of Nephi in 4th grade English. And I color-coded it when people were talking. And I got rid of the word Satan, etc., and used this element, whether it's Belial or Mahan. There's different Hebrew words that means the blotted out one. And if I were to do a new edition, this would change. So the my understanding as I've gone through this study is that phrase would also change. So I'm not going to do that. I don't feel compelled to do that. If you read the introduction, you'll understand why at this time I felt compelled to do those things. I'm on, let's piece this together to understand what Nephi did. It's an imperative duty because he built Zion or Jerusalem or whatever label you want to give it. So Yeshua himself said, my kingdom is here. Thank you, Nephi. And he's not talking to the current president of the church, Nephi, the son of Helaman, who had no idea what to do with Samuel the Levite. He was paying homage to the founder of America, the legend of Nephi. And so that's where my loyalty will rest. So I tried to make this simple and readable, but as I go back and review it, I'm like, yeah, I could have done better. And then that's a PDF that has an introduction. And I just uploaded this today, so if you go into books, you can go and see an online reader of this same thing that's searchable. And I had built this in probably 2021, and I've kind of tabled it since then. So it's the same book. My spiritual name is Nephi John. And that was my understanding of what that spiritual calling was at that time. The dove doctrine, the Bar Jonah dove doctrine. And you can turn the pages somehow. How about that way? And it is only the legend of Nephi. First and second Nephi. So, I have no idea if I even had this concept of river islands. So we can see all the uses of river in the legend of Nephi and this iteration of it. So those are all associated with Lemuel. The story of the tree of life. Something about having children like the sands of the sea. The gravel of the river. Interesting metaphor. This is also important. Rivers of wilderness. So as we segue into the geographies, which is going to be very important, we can't bring our understanding of what the word means. Wilderness can mean the ocean. It doesn't have to have the word watery wilderness to mean ocean. I think I developed this in 2008. I need to get rid of the donate and the money stuff. I don't do that anymore. 1828, 1844, 1913. So when you're thinking of geography, and you're thinking of Nephi, whatever you can imagine, multiply it by 10. Multiply it by 10. The geography is simple. Joseph Smith gave us enough clues. The river islands is a huge clue. But the river island is something I found later after I'd already developed a working model of the geography. And this working model is updating. And this working model is imperative. So feedback, discussion is super important. If you went on a mission anywhere in North and South America and you have stories to tell that somehow tie into the ancient American tradition that Lehi built, your voice matters. So I guess that's time to give it a hasta luego, baby. Das Vidanya, Chai Chen, Auf Wiedersehen, Saranara, Poka. Until next time, this is the Masterclass on the Legend of Nephi. I'm your host, Monty from Montana. Cheers and God bless.